everyone, welcome into another live edition of Ask Rice. I'm Sarah Heck, joined by Mike Rice from Atlanta, and we are ready to take your questions. Rice, are you ready to hear what everyone has to ask you?
Yeah, and we have a special guest in Mike Barrett also, so they can throw in some for him too.
So maybe we should change it to hashtag Ask the Mikes.
Ask the Mikes.
Yeah, ask the Mikes. All right. Well, let's just hop into the nitty-gritty of it because so much of this is about playoff seeding and the recent struggles of the Trailblazers. So I guess really we'll just start off and with Corey, and he says, is it possible for us to win a playoff series if we're a lower seed?
Well, I think we better ask the question first. What's the chances of making the playoffs? You know, after the Blazers' last 11, 12, 13 games, I think that's a more pertinent question than who will you play in the playoffs. If we get through this part of the schedule, and I have the schedule for all the teams and what they have to do to make the playoffs. Now, to give you a prime example of why we're saying that, if you look at the Atlanta Hawks, who the Blazers play tomorrow, they played against the Suns yesterday. The Suns, by winning, didn't even gain anything. They're 13 games over 500, the Suns, and they won in Atlanta, and they dropped to 9th because Dallas also won a home game. So they're 13 over. The Atlanta Hawks are 7 games under 500. And they're in 8th place in the East. So they're 2.5 games ahead of the Knicks. So it just goes to show you how competitive the West is, how difficult it is to make the playoffs in the West. So with that in mind, we put together a chart of Memphis, the Suns, Dallas, Golden State, and the Blazers to see which team has the toughest schedule left, which team has more home games, more away games, and with that in mind, we can go on with the questions. But I think the first question, wouldn't you agree, MB, that will the Blazers make the playoffs rather than who they'll play in the playoffs?
That certainly dominated our conversations on the plane and after games. Is, you know, we were talking about seeding, but now when you go through a little rough patch here and trying to get LaMarcus back, it goes from what your seeding is to let's just get in first. And I've heard the players say that too, but they've got to start feeling that too. And the best comment I heard after last night was Robin Lopez said, you got to consider the playoffs have already started. These are playoff games now. Forget everything else. You got to win to get in. And, you know, the schedule is, I know you'll go through it. The Blazers have a favorable schedule, but you just want to get a few victories here and don't really go into a slide. You know, and get home and take care of business. And then you can start talking about positioning. But first things first, get in. And looking at the other schedules around Portland. Blazers is favorable. Some other teams have tough schedules. But Dallas, with their, what do they have, 5 home games left on this homestand?
Yes. Dallas right now has 5 home, 5 away left. They're 43 and 29. They're 2 games in the loss column behind the Blazers. So
and they got the season series.
Yes,
which
it's 1 more game for them. The Blazers have fewer road games left than the 9 playoff teams in the West that are trying for the playoffs. They have the fewest away games. So right there, and if you look at it, Chicago is below or above 500 right now?
Chicago's above.
Above 500. So there's 1 team. Atlanta is below. Utah is below. Lakers are below. So 3 of the 4 road games the Blazers have left are all against below 500 teams. So right there, schedule-wise, and with LaMarcus coming back, you would think the Blazers have an edge over especially Memphis, who has 8 away games left compared to the Blazers' 4. The Suns have 7 away games left compared to the Blazers' 4. So right there, you would think the Blazers would have an advantage schedule-wise, but Memphis and the Suns lately have been better than the Blazers winning on the road. So I think that kind of dictates right there that the schedule isn't everything when you look at who's going to make the playoffs.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I think a lot of people are questioning how the Trailblazers, their recent woes on the road and just in general, even playing teams that are below 500 in their struggles. So we have a question here. This one comes from Thavi, and he says, what seed do you think the Trailblazers will get if they make the playoffs? Or is with the way that the guys have been stumbling as of late, does that make it too difficult to predict at this point?
MB, what do you think about where they might finish?
You know, because, and this is why on the last road trip, and you can't go back and do this, but the loss in Dallas, which came late in that game, and then the loss in Houston, the reason why, and we tried to explain it at the time, the reason why those were killers, and more the Dallas game, because you lose season series. When you lose season series and you look at the games back in the standings, you got to be a game better, because if you end up tied, they go, and that, or they get the spot. For that reason, I would guess, and I know you predicted 7th, and I think that's pretty accurate. I still think 6th is a possibility. And, of course, who knows? These teams all play each other late, and that could really help Portland. Last 5 games of the season, and what is it, like Memphis, Phoenix, Phoenix, Dallas, Dallas, yeah. Phoenix. So if those teams can knock each other off, and, of course, an injury or two, just as we know, changes everything.
Yeah.
So that could still dictate a lot of what happens, and there could be a lot of movement going up to the last couple of games in the of the season. So going into the last game, Utah and then the Clippers, those are going to be big ones for Portland. And of course, the other thing is some of those teams play the top teams. If those teams get set, start resting people, that affects it too, because other games you'd look at and say, okay, if it was meaningful for Oklahoma City, who I think plays a couple of the teams late, you wrote it down last night. We were talking about this.
Yeah, they don't have to.
If they rest people, then that changes stuff. But I would say, I don't know, 5, 6, or 7 still. And honestly, who do you match up best with? I don't know. I mean, we've mentioned that too. Yeah. I don't think 7th is necessarily a horrible place to be.
Yeah, the teams that probably will be most interested in where they end up will be the Clips. You know, they don't want to drop to 4 or 5 and then you have to play number 1. They'd rather play the first round Golden State or the Blazers or Dallas. So the Clippers are 2 games in the loss column behind Oklahoma City, but they're only 1 game in the loss column ahead of the Rockets. The Rockets right now are 4th, and they would open up the series against the Blazers if it finished this way. And if the Blazers, if LaMarcus Aldridge looks good tomorrow night against Atlanta, then the Blazers could get back to playing the way they were earlier, because he should be well rested. The Blazers, as we said, have the most favorable schedule. If LaMarcus, and I think it all comes down to LaMarcus, the teams have scouted the Blazers so much. They know they're a 3-point shooting team. And if you look at the Blazers' 3-point attempts, they're still getting the same amount of attempts, but they're not getting the wide open shots when they had LaMarcus. LaMarcus kind of sets up the whole offense.
And that was last night on the bus. We got on the first bus after the Orlando game, and Joel Freeland, who usually hops on our bus, and he was talking to us, and we joked around, so we need you back, and he said we need LaMarcus back, and so then Joel started talking about how he makes everything, and he kind of went into this whole thing about how he makes life easier on everybody. So you don't want to hook everything on that. If you're the players, you got to prepare for the fact that maybe something else goes wrong and he has a relapse, so you can't bank on that, but that's how the players are feeling as well, and goes to how it makes life so much easier, not just 3-point shooting, but rebounding, defense, all of those things when you're playing small. And Jarrell's done a good job at the 4, but they got to get LA back.
Yeah, and just take a look. If Dallas would have lost Dirk or OKC would have lost Durant, that's just like losing LaMarcus Aldridge with his 24 points a game and 11 rebounds. I mean, you can exist for a while, but after a while against the good teams, it's going to catch up to you. Even some of the bad teams, as we saw the last 2 ball games.
Yeah, you guys touched right there in that last kind of conversation on a lot of points that fans have brought up as questions for you. So let's get into some of the specifics, the first of them being 3-point shooting. And this question comes from Blazers by Sager, and he says, hey, Mike Rice, do you have a problem with the number of 3-pointers the Trailblazers are taking? Because he personally does.
Well, if you're the Suns, for instance, the Suns have been winning road games lately because they're averaging 22 fast break points a game. The Blazers average around 9 fast breaks points a game. So everything the Blazers do is dictated by their half-court offense. Without LaMarcus in there, they really only have Lillard penetrating in and getting to the foul line, but their offense is thrown into LaMarcus Aldridge. The defense collapse. He throws it back. We get an open three-pointer. Without that, they've scouted the Blazers. They're chasing them off the three-point line, but that's what the Blazers do. I mean, they remember they were 29-5 shooting threes, so they're still shooting threes. The personnel can't change, so they're going to be a three-point shooting team the rest of the year, whether they have LaMarcus or not. And without LaMarcus, the three-pointers aren't going to be as easy. So, yes, you would like to see more points in the paint. They're 29th in the NBA at that, but I don't think you're going to see that the rest of the year. They are what they are.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of goes to this question from Rip City Shank, and he says, once Aldridge and Freeland are healthy, will the Blazers be able to get back to the elite level that they played at earlier in the season?
Well, I don't think there's any reason. I thought Jason Quick had a good article today, when talking about what does it mean to be hot or cold leading up to the playoffs. Sometimes it means a lot. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything. And one of the examples he brought up was the Portland team in 2009 that had been hot, then drops the first game to Houston, it loses home court advantage, and loses the series basically in the first quarter of game 1 when Yao had 9 of the first 11 for Houston. The other team who had been cold was Dallas, which was obviously Terry Stotts was there then. They didn't roll into the playoffs on any kind of a roll, and they went on to win the title. So to think that you could get to that level or get to the level you were at before, I don't know. But I know they can get in a more positive mindset than they're in right now. And there still is time to start building on a hot streak. But as far as what it means to be going in streaking or slumping, there's data to suggest it isn't as important as you might think. Now, for this team, maybe it feels like right now it needs to improve because they looked so discouraged last night, especially in that Orlando game. They looked tired, and I think more mentally tired than anything else. And as you said, people underestimate scouting. And I don't know if you agree with this, but when I was thinking about this earlier, the team that seemed to expose Portland or at least set up a template for other teams to follow was the San Antonio game right after the All-Star break. When LaMarcus was going to sit out, all of a sudden the Spurs jumped the three-point line. They overplay every pass on the perimeter. Blazers still could have and maybe should have won that game. That was at the Moda Center. But it seems like since then, other teams went, aha, and started playing Portland that way. And then all of a sudden you start getting overly reliant on the three-point shot, and when it doesn't fall, you're dead. And that's what has happened in the last few games. So to think that to get back to the original question, yeah, they could, especially if LaMarcus can get back. And I'm glad he's coming back now and not 2 games before the end of the regular season, because he can get a chance to start getting and we watched him work out last night. He looked terrific. So hopefully that's the case for tomorrow night. And then you start to build. And these guys didn't just all of a sudden forget how to be a good team. They'll get that back, hopefully. Can they get back to where they were when they jumped on people to start the season? Well, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and there are a few things that play into playing the Lakers. Both the Suns and the Blazers have to go to the Lakers. And if the Lakers played like they did last night against the Knicks, having that 51-point quarter, that's a factor you can't determine ahead of time how it's going to play out. Plus the fact there are big games left. Memphis plays at Portland when we get back from this road trip. That is a tremendously big game in the standings for both Memphis, because they have 29 losses, the Blazers 27. Memphis plays at Utah tomorrow. Then they play Golden State. Then they play Portland, at Denver, and at Minnesota. They have 5 games road trip coming up. That'll make or break Memphis. The Suns play at Portland April 4th. That will be a 2-game swing.
They play at Washington tonight.
Yes, they play Washington tonight. Then the Knicks go, and they're Knicks on that big road trip. They play in Phoenix on the 28th. Then the Suns go to the Lakers on the 30th, and the Clips go to the Suns a day later, and then the Suns are at the Blazers. So if you look at Phoenix, they've got a healthy squad now. Both guards are back. Bledsoe has come back. That's why they beat the Atlanta Hawks this past week. The guards, Dragic and Bledsoe, ended up with 46 points. Half of them on fast break points. So that's something the Blazers can't do. They've got to work through a half-court offense. But this race, it is going to come down to the end. There is no doubt about it when you look at the standings.
Absolutely. And you guys talked about, the tough schedules for a lot of teams here towards the end and fatigue. And Jamie has a question in the chat, and he says, at this point, is it mental fatigue or is it physical fatigue for the Trailblazers?
I would say a little both in terms of, Damian looks tired. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's probably both mental and physical. Not only the amount of games, but the amount that he has been relied on to carry the team and what opposing defenses are doing to him. We talked about it on the broadcast last night. Orlando wasn't letting him breathe. They knew once they got a little lead, if there's going to be that guy that's going to bring him back. Everybody watches highlight shows after the NBA, and they know that Lillard is a fourth-quarter three-point shooter. So they know that that's Portland's route to a comeback if they have one. It's Damian. And when you're fighting through doubles and you're getting shoved and grabbed all night long, it does wear you out. So I think there's probably a little of both with him. But I do think the mental fatigue is certainly a good question, especially – winning's a cure-all. When you can get a few wins, and all of a sudden, if you win the Miami game, let's say if you start the trip with a victory, it changes the way the last two games are played. But because you lose in Miami, that's what you always say off the air when we get done with broadcasts. If you win that game, you don't feel that game like you do the next night if you had lost it. That's a huge part of the mental frame of mind and the mental fatigue that goes with the NBA schedule. If you're on a streak, back-to-backs don't mean that much. If you're losing and if you lose games in a difficult way, then you start entering into the whole back-to-back talk, 4 and 5 nights, all of that stuff, because it taxes you.
Lillard hasn't gone through this before. Last year, the Blazers were on a 13-game losing streak, so everything was kind of throw up, have fun. Now the pressure of the playoffs.
Pressure of having something to lose.
Yes, and you're looking each day at what the other teams are doing, what you're doing. All of a sudden now the Blazers had third, fourth. Everyone was saying, okay, who do we match? Now it's, do we make the playoffs? And the Suns are playing well. Memphis is playing well. All the teams that are behind the Blazers, Dallas wins a big game last night. So all these teams are playing for something, and that really, on a guy like Lillard, he didn't have Aldridge to help him out. It was all on his shoulders. So it is mentally draining in this NBA season. And now that Aldridge is back, you hope things turn around.
Absolutely. One of the other things I know when we especially talk about the playoffs and success in the playoffs and making a final push is defense. And that's something that a lot of our fans have brought up. This question from Devin the Dude, he says, when are we going to start playing defense? It won't matter if LA comes back if we can't keep anyone in front of us. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, the defense hasn't been great. Orlando, a team that doesn't score, doesn't shoot ordinarily very well, made the defense look bad last night. But I will also say that the night before that in Miami, that's the #1 field goal percentage team in the NBA. Blazers held them to 44%. You don't hold Miami to 44%. And I thought the defense was very good in that ball game. LeBron still got his, but they did a good job on everybody else. So it's more of a, when you bring up the whole thing about fatigue, and last night there were instances, certainly, and this part of this was mental discouragement, but there were times, I remember Nick late in the game letting an offensive rebound get away that on the defensive end, a defensive rebound, that he doesn't do. And that's when you look and go, wow, is it legs? Is it just discouragement? And that has to do with defense too. And so, having LaMarcus back will help in that, basically because I think it helps with defensive rebounding. and you're not fighting a team who's getting a second and third opportunity in the same possession. How many times did we see that last night?
Yeah, you have to think back of the history of this team this year. They're averaging 108 points a game. So what has been winning games for the Blazers? Offense. And they haven't started out many games. Like the end of the last night's game, the Blazers were really getting after Orlando, but it was too late. I mean, you know, they had done what they had done, and Orlando did a pretty good job of stopping our three-point shooting. So we tried to win it at the end with defense. Now, will that happen at the start of the game? Well, the Blazers at the start of the game are more aware of what they're doing on offense to win a game than they are aware of what they're doing on defense. Memphis doesn't do that. There are certain teams. Golden State's not sure whether they're a defensive team, an offensive team. That's why they struggle sometimes. They're not quite sure how they're going to win games. Blazers are always sure it's the offense that's going to win games for us, not the defense. Now, when they get to the playoffs, how much is that going to hurt them? That depends on who they play. If they play a team that they don't match up well with, the other team is so much better defensively than they are, then they've got problems. If the other team tries to win with offense, then it's not so much a problem. So right now, it's just defense hasn't won a lot of games for the Blazers. It's kept them in games and allowed their offense to win. And now we're going to see going down the stretch against the Atlanta Hawks, a three-point shooting team, a running team, a scoring team. You know, how much can our defense help us? Now, last time we played Atlanta, we shut down Korver. He's not playing tonight in Minnesota. He's waiting to play the Blazers tomorrow night, so he'll be a factor in the game. But we shut him down and ended his streak. Now the Blazers, you know, it's playoff time. They've got to play a little more defense at the start of the game and not depend on their offense so much. So it'll be interesting. Chicago, all they do is win games with defense. And so the Blazers are going to have to go in, play some defense, and get LaMarcus going on offense. He always plays well against Chicago. So, you know, these next two games are going to probably decide how the Blazers play in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And I mean, rounding out that conversation about these final 10 games and the playoffs, what do you guys think that the Trailblazers need to do to kind of get over these struggles and hopefully have a better streak heading into the postseason?
Well, I mean, the one obvious one we're kind of alluding to, and everything won't cure itself with LaMarcus's return, but that at least gets the team back mentally knowing there's a capable starting line. We mentioned that I don't know what Joel Freeland's status is right now, and I think at times we mention, and we haven't mentioned it a lot, but they do miss him, and hopefully just the stability he provided, and he's trying to get back, and it's frustrating for him because he fought so hard for an opportunity, and now he's not getting it, and his knee feels good, but once in a while he feels instability in the knee, and it's keeping him from progressing like he would like. But so that's just the part about getting people back. Winning a close game would help the mental side of it because this team won all of those, and now they're 2-8 in games decided by 2 or fewer. Then the next time you're in one of those, it's muscle memory, it's recent memory, and if you have lost a lot of those, all of a sudden your confidence is sapped in those, and we've seen that where guys are passing up shots that they normally early in the year let fly with total confidence, and right now they're not. In Miami, that was a little bit of an example. Damian didn't have any field goals in the second half. He and Wesley both go for that ball to start that possession, and I think normally early in the year, Damian's a step back three for the win. They don't go for the tie, they go for the win. And I'm not getting on him for that. He took it hard to the rim and tried to force overtime, got the shot blocked by Bosch. But there's little things like that. They need to win a close game. They need to win any game right now, obviously. But win a close game in a tight battle, get that feeling back, put together a little bit of a streak if they can. Just of good play. I mean, wins, yes, but good play, yes. And that, I think, helps you get to the point where maybe you start remembering what you are and what you established early in the season, and maybe that helps you forget quickly about this kind of stuff, because it doesn't take much to get back to where you're feeling good again, and all of a sudden when the playoffs come, it's a whole new season, and hopefully a lot of this is just forgotten.
Yeah, because if you look at how the Blazers would continue on that question, their second unit none of the guys think about defense winning games. You've got Will Barton, you've got Thomas Robinson, Mo Williams, you can go right down, Myers Leonard. They all think about, how am I doing on the offensive end? How, Will Barton, man, he goes one-on-one, dunks the ball. Now, he feels good. He doesn't feel good. He's not a Wesley Matthews or a Nick who can feel good by stopping somebody on the other end.
Or a Joel Freeland.
Right. That's his main purpose. Keep the arms up. Weak side help on defense. Whereas most of the Blazers' second unit guys are all offensive guys. They feel good when they play well on offense. They don't feel anything on the defensive end. And that's how you can help the Blazers. Like Memphis, Tony Allen comes in and he's a stopper. Jamal Crawford is an offensive guy for the Clippers. They know that. They have J.J. Redick's an offensive guy. But they also have defensive guys in there that are blocking shots, getting rebounds. So, the second unit, I don't know how much they're going to help the Blazers in the playoffs, thinking offense only. But
well, how many of the guys that are playing now played in the early part of the season? When Freeland was healthy, this rotation was tight.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, and we mentioned this last night, there are 5 guys out on the floor in the last few weeks who haven't played much together, played much at all, but played much together during these games. And the one thing everybody said about Portland early in the season is what great on-court chemistry. Why? Because they had the same starting lineup for 53 games.
Right.
And they had the same subs coming in for most of those 53 games.
Right at the certain.
You could time Stas' rotation with a watch. You know when these guys are headed to the table. And you'll hear us on broadcast say, well, any second we're going to see, and here he comes. Because you knew. And the players on the floor knew. There's a comfort in that. And so now you don't have it. And it makes everything not only inconsistent, but guys are unsure about when they're coming out, how long this chance will be. If Myers gets in and makes a mistake, he's looking over his shoulder. So these are things you got to fight through, but it also has lended to this inconsistent pattern that they have had as of late of not only bench play, and that's because what you were talking about, but the entire rotation, and that has so much to do with this. And they didn't have early foul trouble, and they really haven't had it now. But all of these things disrupt your chemistry and really your strategy in these ball games, and it's just been so up and down, and so have the minutes and different guys coming in. It's hard to create that on-court chemistry they had during their hot start.
Yeah. And I think L.A. made a good point. He said last time he came in, he didn't get any practice time at all. This time, for the last 2 days, he's been moving around, and he said, I will be much better coming back this time than last time, and the Blazers really need that.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that's the case, and the next time we're able to have another Q&A session, we are of a better mindset, hoping that things are rolling and not quite so bumpy. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys, the fans, so much for submitting your questions for Ask Rice using that hashtag on social media. We'll be sure to do it again as the playoffs approach, so keep an eye on social media, and we will see you guys all next time.
Wait a minute.
He's going into Sith mode now.
I'm going to be out on the streets in a minute.
He's the emperor.
Yes.
Okay. Bye, Rice. Thanks again, guys.